Welcome to Read Naturally's webinar on TakeAim at Vocabulary. Before I get started, I want to thank you for being here. It really says a lot about you as educators that you would take the time out of your very busy schedules to learn about something that might help some of your students. TakeAim at Vocabulary is a program for students who are struggling with vocabulary, and I'm going to cover that program today in this webinar. My name is Claire Hayes. I've worked for Read Naturally for over 16 years now, and I've been fortunate enough to use the various intervention that Read Naturally has, including TakeAim at Vocabulary. So we're going to go through this presentation, and we will have some time at the end for questions. Before we get started, I want to share with you just a little story that illustrates the power of vocabulary. In an article by Luciano Pesuelo, he describes the importance of vocabulary through George Orwell's novel, 1984. It happens to be one of my favorite books. In this famous book, Orwell describes a world ruled by government that has complete control. Big Brother is what it's called. The government is called in the book, and Big Brother is watching at every home. The official language, which is implemented by Big Brother, is called newspeak. Some of you may remember, if you've read this book, that the vocabulary of newspeak gets smaller every year. It decreases to the point where words like freedom no longer exist. The citizens no longer have words to fully form or express their ideas, so people continue to grow more and more powerless. Now, obviously, this is an extreme scenario, but it illustrates the point that vocabulary is extremely powerful. Without words, you are closed to new insights, new ways of thinking, reasoning skills, and the ability to express your thoughts and feelings. Words are powerful, right? Words make up possibilities. And of course, that's what we want for all of our students. That's the real importance of vocabulary, and that's why you're here today, right? Because you know that when we expand our students' vocabularies, they have more sophisticated thinking and comprehension skills. This gives our students the ability to choose their words with greater precision and the opportunity to read and comprehend text in a wide range of curricula. A rich, full vocabulary, of course, opens opportunities for our students, and conversely, a limited, inadequate vocabulary closes many opportunities. The National Panel of Reading states that a complex process of comprehension is critical to the development of children's reading skills, okay? And it cannot be understood without a clear understanding of the role of vocabulary development and instruction play in understanding what is read. Of course, we know this. They can't understand what they're reading unless they understand the key vocabulary. Shaw's classic study back from 1990 shows that students with low vocabulary development were able to maintain their overall reading scores at expected grade levels through grade 4, okay? But once their mean scores for word recognition and word meaning began to slip, as words became more abstract, technical, and literary, which happens around 4th grade, right? Declines in word recognition and word meaning continued, and by grade 7, the student scores had fallen 3 grade levels below. So how do we prevent this decline in reading achievement? The National Panel's review identified that age-appropriate vocabulary instruction does lead to gains in reading comprehension, right? We know this. Explicit instruction with multiple exposures to words that are valuable in many texts and extend over multiple class periods show the greatest gains. TakeAim at Vocabulary is a vocabulary building curriculum that utilizes explicit instruction to enrich students' vocabularies. TakeAim teaches high-quality, sophisticated word. Through various activities, students deepen their understanding of target vocabulary words. And TakeAim also, of course, supports the development of reading comprehension. Today, we're going to discuss the TakeAim program and how it supports vocabulary development in our readers. We look at the research that supports TakeAim to give you some background knowledge about the research-based teaching methods, learning strategies, and words in the curriculum. Then we will discuss how to use TakeAim with your students so that you can see how to implement the curriculum in your actual classroom. We will then walk through the steps of the program to give you a deeper understanding of how students work to complete a lesson and the benefits of each of the activities. TakeAim aligns with the research-based principles and activities to support vocabulary development. Students learn high-quality words in TakeAim through a combination of methods. Each target word appears in a unit multiple times in a variety of contexts, which gives the students the chance to encounter each word in multiple ways. And there's many research studies that show the importance of this. Another way is that students are taught words explicitly, which includes providing embedded definitions of target words in text. Target words are taught in context, which increases word knowledge. And target words and glossaries have student-friendly definitions written in everyday language so that students can understand them. There's also semantic mapping activity, which requires students to connect the target words to other words, parts of speech, or personal experiences. And of course, that also heightens comprehension and understanding of those words. In TakeAim, students learn 3 research-based strategies to help them determine word meanings independently. First, using context clues. When students are instructed on how to use context clues to their advantage, they are better equipped to infer the meanings of unknown words. The ability to use contextual information has been shown to produce substantial long-term growth in vocabulary. We simply can't teach our students every single word there is, but we can teach them how to figure out the meaning based on the context. The second research-based learning strategy that's used is analyzing word parts. Analyzing word parts is another strategy that helps students when they're faced with an unknown vocabulary. When students are taught to identify the meaning of root words, prefixes, suffixes, this helps them break down words and get an understanding of what the word is meaning. The third is using dictionary or glossary. Using a dictionary or glossary is another way to confirm word meanings and develop word knowledge. However, research demonstrates that correctly interpreting dictionary definitions is often incredibly challenging for students. So what you need is the use of a dictionary that contains clear definitions in terms that students can understand. And that will, of course, advance their understanding. When you talk about the word selection for TakeAim at Vocabulary, we chose high quality, useful target words to form the foundation of TakeAim. So these words are sophisticated and appropriate for the level of difficulty. They are words that students are unlikely to know, but likely to encounter often as texts increase in difficulty. TakeAim's target words fall into the category of researchers Beck and McCowan refer to as high utility. And so what we mean by that is that they are words that are often used with mature language users. The words selected in TakeAim are carefully chosen from a variety of sources. One is a new academic word list. That's important if you want to take a look at what some important vocabulary words you might want to teach to students outside this program. A new academic word list is the name of it, and it identifies words that students typically encounter in academic settings. Another good source that we used was the Living Word Vocabulary. And this is a comprehensive list that assigns a value to words based on the level of difficulty. This list was key in selecting the words that were appropriate for each TakeAim level. TakeAim's writers also reference the Educator's Word Frequency Guide, and that does what you would expect it to based on the title. It identifies how often words appear in the written world and their level of difficulty. And so this source helped ensure that TakeAim's target words were not only appropriate for the level of difficulty, but also useful words that students will encounter often. So now what we're going to talk about is using TakeAim with your students. And so we're going to take a deeper look at how do you use it with your students. And of course, the first question is which students is this appropriate for, of course? And may not surprise you that students who need explicit instruction to enrich their reading vocabulary are perfect candidates for this program. However, you will need to make sure that the level of material is right. So to work in TakeAim, a student must be able to read stories in the level. So for example, we have 2 levels. Our first is TakeAim's Goldenrod level, and it's designed for students who are reading at a 4th grade level or above and need vocabulary support. TakeAim's second level is the Indigo level, which is designed for students who are reading at a 5th grade level and above and need vocabulary support. If If a student meets the first requirement, you also need to make sure that the student will benefit from studying the words taught in the level. If a student lacks understanding of many of the target words in the level, then he or she will benefit, of course, from working in that level. If a student knows most of the words in the level, then that level is not going to be appropriate for him or her. So we have a level assessment that's available to help identify whether a student can benefit from the level that you're considering. Each TakeAim level contains 12 full-color textbooks and a set of corresponding audio CDs. There's also a storage case, reproducible blackline master books, which are what you can make copies of their worksheets so that they don't write in the textbook, they write on their worksheets. And then, of course, there's a teacher's manual. So obviously you don't have a textbook in front of you, but you do have a sample. So one of the handouts that was available to download is a sample handout, and I believe it's titled appropriately. So if you pull up that sample handout, you can take a look at some of the different aspects. And when we go through the actual steps, you'll be looking at that in depth. But each student textbook forms a unit, okay? The textbook is actually soft covered, but it is not to be written in. There are 4 theme-related nonfiction stories in each of the 12 books. So the 12 books in each level, and within the books, the book is considered one unit, and the unit has 4 nonfiction stories. The students learn 6 target words from each of those 4 stories. So each unit it has 24 words that are explicitly taught. So when a student completes all 12 units, he has studied 288 vocabulary words. The corresponding CD provides audio support for many of the activities in the lesson, and you'll see that when we go through the steps where the audio CD comes in place. The storage cases are included for the textbooks as well as audio CDs to help you organize them and have a nice place for them to sit. The 2 Blackline Masters contain all the reproducible students need to work in the program. And of course, the teacher manual is included in the program material, and the manual includes lesson plans, information necessary to ensure the proper use of TakeAim, and a training unit to teach students on how to use it properly. We do recommend that you use TakeAim 5 days a week, if possible, and 30 to 45-minute sessions is what we would recommend. If you have 30-minute sessions, as you can see on your slide, you're not going to be able to get through a whole lesson in one day. It will take you more than, about 1.5. So we have broken out here. You'll get through lesson 1 on Monday, finish lesson 1 on Tuesday, and start lesson 2. And then on Wednesday, you can finish lesson 2 and so forth. If you have 45-minute chunks of time, students should be able to get through a lesson in that amount of time. However, if they don't, they can just pick up where they left off the following day. Students do work most of the steps independently. So if you have a group of 6, 7, 8 students, and there's one teacher in there cycling through to help with the checkout points where they do need the teacher, and they are working independently. We also have what's called a group format, and that's when a teacher would lead the group through each of the steps. Or you could have small groups working together, and we sell it differently. And so when we get to the end, I will talk about the different price points and the different packaging when it comes to the individualized or group. So just take a minute before we start talking about the steps and think about how your students could benefit from a richer vocabulary. Of course, it would help their thinking and communication skills, their ability to choose words. They will read and comprehend better, and they will develop a more appreciation for words. And so be thinking about these steps and how these steps ensure that these kinds of things are going to happen for your students. So we'll take a look at the steps. When you go into your handouts, if you take a look at the handout, as I mentioned before, that was titled the sample handout. The sample handout starts with a page that says TakeAim at Vocabulary Individualized Format, and it gives you a table of contents of what is in this handout. If you turn to page 3 of this handout, the top of that page says Unit Steps List, and you can follow along here at the steps that we're going to go through as the slides change. We'll also refer to some of the other pages in this sample handout when we get to the particular step that is referenced for those pages. So the first thing students do is they take a unit pretest. And if you want to flip from the steps page over to where you can see the unit pretest, your sample is from goldenrod level, which is the 4th grade reading level or above, and it's unit 5, which is about mysteries. Okay, so this gives the unit pretest. And students have 6 minutes to take this test. They then graph their scores to get a baseline for progress monitoring. So you can see in this graph, after the unit pretest, they graph in blue on the horizontal line to the right of where they write the title of the unit. In red is their post-test, right? We're going to come to a post-test after we get through these. And so then they get to see how much progress they made. And of course, that's really rewarding, having a visual representation of what they knew initially and what they knew at the end. If you do get a student who picks a unit, oftentimes the first unit students will pick will be a unit that they love, right? A student who is fascinated with Egyptian pyramids is going to pick the pyramid unit first. And because he's fascinated with Egyptian pyramids, he may do beautifully on that unit pretest. And you find that out of the 24 words, he actually knows the definition of 22. Maybe not the best thing to have him work in then, right? Because he already knows the definitions of those. So you might tell him that he can read those stories in free time, but he's going to select a different one. It doesn't happen often, but every once in a while you have that scenario, especially if you have a student who's particularly interested in one of the topics of the units. The first thing students do is they read their target words. So now what I want you to do is to turn to page 5 on your sample. You notice that students are going to go through all of the different steps and they're labeled. So of course, the first thing they're going to do is step A, read the target words. They're going to read it with the audio support. Many words that are challenging for students to understand are also challenging for them to read. And so they're going to play their audio CD and listen with their headphones. So each student needs their own CD player and headphones in order to do this program. They will read along with the audio support to the key words, okay? They are just listening to them be read properly. After they read along to the target keywords, they read the story. They're going to end up reading the story 3 times. But the first time they read the story, they just read through the entire story, okay? This section teaches the target words in the context of the story, of course, which is one of the research-based methods that I mentioned earlier. And so just through reading it, they've identified what the target words, now they're going to read it in context. The next thing we have them do is read to understand target words. So after they read through the story 1 time, they turn over to section C, where they read to understand the words. If you look at page 6 of your sample, you will notice that 3 of those key words are defined in text. And that, again, was in one of those research-based strategies that I mentioned, that students are significantly more likely to understand and retain the definition of a word if they are taught the definition at the moment that they see it. So what happens in the audio CD is this audio CD reads this section. You'll see the first 2 sentences under the word bloop, which starts with in the 1960s. At the end of the sentence with the word tracking, a different voice comes on and defines the word tracking. So right when the students encounter it, a different voice comes on and defines it for them. Then the story goes, the original narrator voice goes back and reads until they get to the next keyword, and then that word is defined immediately. Okay? So that is the second time they read along with the audio support. Now, they use context clues in section D, which is on the bottom of page 6 of your sample. And what they do here is they listen to an audio-supported lesson about how to use context clues to figure out words in the story that you may not be familiar with. And so this audio-supported lesson talks them through ways to break down meanings that oftentimes the definition is listed in a sentence that follows or is before the word appears. And there's different context clue lessons with each unit and each passage. After they do their context clues, then they get to sections E and F. So if you turn your page to page 7, you will see E and F. Section E is the final time they read along with the audio CD. And in this time, they are given the other 3 words defined in context. Remember, that was the research-based strategy. We did it the first 3 words. Now we're going to define the second 3 words at the moment that they see them. And that will heighten the chance that they are going to retain those words. After their final read along, they will complete section F, which is called Read to Master. So what I want you to do now, when we're in section F, is take a look at page 11. On page 11 of your sample, this is the make ready copies from your student worksheets, okay? So this is these first few pages that we've been going through are samples from that textbook. Now, page 11 is a sample from the student worksheet. So this is what students are writing in. Of course, for steps A through E, the student doesn't need to record anything, right? He was or she was reading along with the audio support and getting an audio lesson about context clues, and so they don't need to do any writing there. For section F, when they read to master, they need to practice reading this passage 3 times. And so it says on page 7, if you turn back to page 7 where you see section F where it says read to master, it tells the student to turn to section B. The reason we have them turn to section B is because that's where the entire story is written without the definitions appearing for the words. So we want them to read the story until they can read it fluently, with good expression at a good rate. But we don't want them to read the definitions of the words. We just want them to read the entire passage. So they go ahead and on page 11, they make a check mark after they read to master the first time and then the second time and the third time. So that lets us know, the teacher know that they have completed section F, which is read to master. So now if you go to the student activity page, again, we're on page 11, and you'll notice that the next section is section G. So again, we didn't have to record anything for A to E. F, they're just making a check mark each time they practice from the section B page, and they are reading without audio support, just reading on their own. Then we get to section G. And of course, section G is comprehension questions. So if you turn back to page 8 in your sample booklet, you can see that section G says answer the comprehension questions. The first one is main idea, the second one is a detail, the third one is a vocabulary, and the final one is an inference question. Okay, so the students read these questions and they answer them in section G on the worksheet on page 11, 1, 2, 3, and 4. They write their answers. Okay, then we get to section H, where they sketch the key words. And you can see in the on the slide here that students are quickly drawing a picture about what that word means to them. That's another one of the research-based strategies, right? Is that if students can connect it to something personal, can create an image that will help them maintain their knowledge about that word and remember what it means. This is not a long drawing activity, right? We're not in art class, we're in reading class. So I usually have students, they get 1 or 2 minutes for each one. I do not want them spending a lot of time on this. And so you need to make sure that that's what's happening. But they just need to draw a real quick picture to give themselves something that connects personally or a visual image. Okay, so that is section 8. And you can see on page 8 of the sample, which is from the textbook, it gives the students the definition as well as a sentence, so they can take a look at the 6 different words that they are supposed to sketch, and then they can sketch them on their student worksheet under section H, where it says sketch keywords. Then section I, they have to clarify their target words. So if you take a look at page 9, you have questions that are vocabulary questions, okay? And so they have to write the correct answer to those questions, which will define the 6 words that they were given. And you can see that they will write those down in section I on their worksheet. Then they can study their word parts. If you take a look at page 10 of the sample, you see that the section J says study the word parts. And when students study the word parts, section J teaches first the prefix or suffix. This section incorporates the second research-based learning strategy that I introduced today in analyzing word parts. We already talked about context clues, and now we're talking about analyzing word parts. And students listen and respond to the audio to learn the suffix or prefix or root. Then students answer multiple choice questions based on that affix and record their answers in their student packet. Okay, so this step provides explicit instruction for students about word parts and how they provide clues about words' meanings. Developing this skill helps students determine the meanings of unknown words that they will encounter in the future. And again, my point that you all know all too well, we can't teach students every word in the world. So we need to teach them how to figure it out with context clues, and we need to teach them how to figure it out with breaking words apart. And so this section J is where they do that breaking words apart. Okay, then they answer comprehension that help them, that makes them apply what they learned in the audio supported lesson about breaking words apart, and they will write those answers in section J. Now section K is what's called a hink pink. Students will complete a hink pink. If you're not familiar with what a hink pink is, it's a rhyming word puzzle. So words in the first part of the sentence are synonyms for the words in the second part. And the words in the second part rhyme. So for example, a humorous rabbit is a funny bunny. Okay, so students complete the hink pink puzzle to confirm they have answered all their questions correctly. The students will use the answers from sections G, I, and J to fill in the blanks for the hink pink. If their choices are correct, the hink pink makes sense. If the hink pink does not make sense, then students need to go back and correct the errors they've made in answering the questions. The hink pink is a fun, motivating way for students to answer and score their questions, and it also teaches synonyms and additional vocabulary words. So you can take a look at page 11 where it says, check the hink pink, and it will tell you, it will tell the student whether or not they answered their questions right, all the way from the comprehension to the vocabulary questions to the word part questions. It will let them know. There's also a part called about enrichment. And the enrichment, if you take a look at page 12, it will list some enrichment activities that you can do with students. And some people do the enrichment in the classroom, some people assign it as homework, some people skip it, so you just have to decide what it is you want to do with your enrichment activity. The final part for each story within the unit is the lesson checkout. So the lesson checkout, it helps you as the teacher determine if the student is ready to move on to the next lesson in the unit. Okay, so to move on to the next lesson, the student must be able to read the target words aloud, read the story fluently. They have to define the target words for you. And then the student must also have answered the questions correctly. So a correct hink pink indicates the correct answers on the unit activity. As a student passes each of the 4 requirements, you can mark the bullseye. Once a student has all 4 check marks, he or she has scored a bullseye for that lesson, then the student is ready to move on to the next lesson in the unit. Okay? So after they do that, then the student will go on to that next lesson in the unit. Finally, they will analyze word parts. So after completing all 4 lessons, they will finish that first lesson. And then remember I said that there are 4 stories in each unit. So after they do the first one, then they go and do all those things for the second one, and then the third one, and then the fourth one. Okay? One neat thing about the words that appear in the first story, they are likely to appear in one of the subsequent stories. So if a word was explicitly taught in the first story of the unit, it appears again throughout the unit. And so the students are expected to remember that, and then they see it again in subsequent text and in a different area, and that also is a way to heighten their understanding. So at the end of the entire unit, they can analyze target words. And they do this by semantic mapping activity. And this is on page 12 of your sample handout. So remember that semantic mapping was part of the research-based teaching methods used in TakeAim. And the semantic mapping activities in this section teach students to associate the new words with familiar words and also develop knowledge of synonyms, antonyms, and parts of speech. Okay, so throughout the TakeAim units, students do various types of semantic mapping. There's the one that's the sample here, but the different types include grouping words by meaning, grouping by part of speech, mapping target words with synonyms and antonyms, and associating target words with other words. And that happens at the end of each unit. The final thing that happens at the end of the unit is they study words, and then they have that unit post-test. So before taking the unit post-test, students go back and study the target words taught in the unit. Okay, so to study, students can use flashcards provided in the student packet. They can review their sketches, and so that will help them connect the personal thing that they draw or thought about. They can also use the glossary to review target words. So using the TakeAim glossary incorporates that third research-based strategy of using glossaries. Of course, that was also incorporated as the words were defined in context, because again, the important part about the glossary is the definition has to be student-friendly, and that is the case with all of these. So if you take a look at page 15 in your sample booklet, you can see the glossary, a sample of the glossary that is in each of the unit books. And so you can get an idea of what it looks like. Of course, it would be in color, but you can get an idea of what it looks like and what some of the, how simple the definitions are so that they are friendly for the students. So when students finish studying, they can take their unit post-test. The unit post-test is the same as the pretest. Okay, remember they took that pretest at the beginning of the unit and graphed how far they got, and now it's the same. It's just they're in a different order. The post-test motivates students by providing evidence of their progress. So they've been working hard, they've been learning all these words, and now they get to see that it paid off because they get a numeric, measurable number as to how much progress they made. Maybe they only got 3 or 4 right on the pre-test, and on the post-test they got 22 or 23 right. I mean, that's a tremendous gain, and so they get to see that progress right in on their sheet. So there are different activities that you can assign. There's crossword puzzles, and of course the flashcards that students use to study if they choose to study that way. And you can assign crossword puzzles to take home for fun activities or as homework, however you want to use those additional activities that come with each unit. So now we've gone through the steps, and so now I'm going to just talk briefly about the materials and the product side rather than the strategy and the research and the implementation side. So as I've already mentioned, you have the audio supported curriculum designed to build vocabulary. That's what TakeAim at vocabulary is, and students learn their sophisticated, high-quality words taught in context of all nonfiction stories. It's available in 2 levels, which I mentioned, but I'm going to mention it again. Goldenrod is level 4. It's like 4th grade reading level or above. So students have to be able to read at least at a 4th grade reading level. And then Indigo is 5th grade level. So students might be reading at a higher than a 5th grade level, but they need to be at least at a 5th grade level. We also have it available in the individualized and group format, which I'll talk about in a minute. Regardless of the level, there are 12 full-color textbooks. They're soft-cover textbooks. There's 12 audio CDs. There's a storage case, and there's reproducible masters, as well as a teacher's manual. So the reproducible masters are those worksheets that I showed you where they record their answers. And of course, the color textbooks are what they use to work through the materials. Because there's 12 CDs and 12 textbooks, you could have 12 students working on it at a time, right? In practice, you can imagine that when a student picks and finishes one unit, he needs the next unit. So I found that about 7 or 8 students working in one unit at the same time is about as many as you can have and have it the flow work as far as one student needing a different one when because they need to have that with them while they're working on it. So if the unit on mysteries is being used by Jenny, then Johnny can't do mysteries. He has to pick a different one. So about 7 or 8 students works very, very well as far as the flow with materials. Now the group format comes with 12 full color textbooks, but there's 6 copies of each. okay? And you get the audio CDs, but there's 6 copies of each. Okay, so then you can have groups of 6 working through it together. You can be leading a group of 6 at one time, all doing the same activities. The group format, of course, tends to take a little longer to get through because there's discussion, and there's pros and cons to that, of course. But a lot of people, we originally had just the individualized format, and we had so many people requesting a group format that we created this kind of thing. When you do a group format, you can purchase all 12 units at a time, or you can purchase 3 units at a time. So you get 6 copies of 3 of the units. And that's available on our website that lists which ones are in there. So if you're thinking of doing the group format, but you can't get all 12 at the same time, you could get a few. You could get 6 or 3 at one time and then expand from there. Of course, there are slightly different steps and the layout is slightly different. So you can see here, depending on which you purchase, you would get the unit steps list for individualized formats, or you'd get the unit steps list for group format. The steps are very similar. There's just slight modifications based on how it's organized. And of course, it's fairly straightforward when you look at the teacher's manual as well as the unit steps list. Again, the sample, or I'm not the sample, I'm sorry, the student worksheets look slightly different as well. So the individualized format is over on the left and the group format is over on the right. So the appearance of those things look slightly different. The textbooks look identical, but the two things that are the mainly different are those steps as well as the student worksheets. So now we've discussed TakeAim. All right, we remember at the beginning we talked about the research supporting TakeAim and how TakeAim uses the research that's out there throughout all the different programs or all the different steps that students go through. We also talked about how to use TakeAim with your students. We walked through the steps of TakeAim, and we talked briefly about the individual and group formats for TakeAim. There's more information on our website, of course. You can email us. You can also call us. I did want to mention pricing. I didn't include it in my presentation, so I'm going to go ahead and mention it here. For the individualized format, the pricing is for each level. So goldenrod being one level, you'd get 1 copy of each of the 12 textbooks, 1 copy of each of the 12 audio CDs, a teacher's manual, and a copy of the reproducible samples for the student materials, okay? So the individualized format is $269 for each level. If you want to do the group format, which is when you get 6 copies of each textbook, that is $995. So you get 72 unit work textbooks, right? Because you get 6 copies of all 12 units. And then if you want to get the mini level pack, you can do units, we break it up as A, B, C, and D. And so in each one you get 3 of the units, and it has it listed on our website. And then it's $299. So you get 6 copies of each from 3 of the units. Okay, so 6 copies of the CDs and 6 copies of the textbooks for 3 of the units, and that's $299. And again, that's available on our website. If you click on the TakeAim under interventions and go to the order tab, that pricing information is in there. We also have samples on our website that you can take a look at. So if you want to take a look at additional samples, and there is also an assessment packet available on our website. So if you go under TakeAim on our website and click on the samples tab, it will take you to the individualized format assessment packet as well, as samples from Goldenrod and Indigo. In the sample packet you have here is from Goldenrod. So if you want to see a sample from Indigo, please go look at our website for that. Again, my name is Claire Hayes. Feel free to contact me directly with questions. I really appreciate your time here today. Like I said at the beginning, it really says a lot about you as educators that you're willing to utilize some of this time to learn about something that may help some of your students. So please reach out to us with additional questions. Thank you very much for your time and have a wonderful day.